What were the three disasters of Wu? The three disasters of Wu, also known as the Four Buddhist Persecutions in China, were periods of wholesale suppression carried out against Buddhism on four separate occasions that began in the 5th century and continued until the 4th such period of aggression against Buddhism in the 10th century. These periods of suppression were conducted by four different Chinese emperors, beginning with the Emperor Taiwu of the Northern Wei dynasty, Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty, Emperor Wuzong of the Tang dynasty, and finally by Emperor Shizong of the Later Zhou dynasty. The first three events listed are collectively known as the three disasters of Wu. They were named as such as the three emperors that carried out the persecutions. Posthumous or temple names each included the character Wu. The first disaster of Wu. The first disaster of Wu began in the year 446 when Emperor Taiwu of the Northern Wei, and a devout Taoist and a follower of the Northern Celestial Masters, found himself in conflict with his Xiongnu rebel named Gai Wu. During this campaign, weapons were found within Buddhist temples, and the emperor believed all Buddhists were against him. Under the encouragement of his devoutly Taoist Prime Minister Sui Hao, Emperor Taiwu ordered that Buddhism be abolished under the penalty of death. Buddhists in the Wuzong region, the region which was the stronghold of Gai Wu's rebellion, were slaughtered. The ban on Buddhism was relaxed in the later years of Taiwu's reign and formally ended when his grandson, Emperor Wuzong, a Buddhist, became emperor in 452. The second disaster of Wu. The second disaster of Wu began just over a century later in 567 when a former Buddhist priest, Wei Yuansong, submitted a memorial to the Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty calling for the abolition of Buddhism. In 574 and again in 577, Emperor Wu had Buddhist and Taoist images destroyed, and the clergy were ordered to return to lay life. The emperor, believing that the temples had become too powerful and rich, confiscated the land belonging to Buddhists, giving it to his soldiers. During this period, the Shaolin monastery was closed, but later allowed to reopen after Emperor Xuan of Northern Zhou had the monastery renovated. When compared to the first disaster of Wu, the second was most probably bloodless. When it officially ended is difficult to gauge, but it was probably over by the time Emperor Wu's son, Emperor Xuan, took the throne in 578. The third disaster of Wu. The third disaster of Wu occurred in 845 when Taoist Emperor Wuzong of the Tang dynasty initiated what became known as the Great Anti-Buddhist Persecution in an effort to appropriate war funds. This was achieved by stripping Buddhism of its financial wealth, as well as to drive foreign influences from Tang dynasty China. Wuzong forced all Buddhist clergy into lay life or into hiding, as well as confiscating any Buddhist property. During this time of religious persecution, followers of Christianity, Judaism, Manichaeanism, and Zoroastrianism were also included in this edict. The ban, however, was not a complete ban. 2 Buddhist temples were allowed to continue within the main capital of Chang'an and its subsidiary capital at Luoyang. Other large municipalities and circuits were also allowed to keep 1 temple in operation on the understanding that no more than 20 monks were to be living there. Across the Chinese Empire, more than 4,600 temples were destroyed, with more than 260,000 monks and nuns being forced to return to civilian life. Persecution continued for a period of around 20 months before Emperor Xuanzong ascended to the throne, had enacted a policy of tolerance in late 846. There were, however, several reasons for the proscriptions. Firstly, the accumulated wealth of the monasteries, and that several people entered the Buddhist community to escape military service and tax duty. The second reason being the financial pressure being put on the state due to the number of temples, priests and nuns, meant successive dynasties were prompted to regulate Buddhism. The third reason was the rise of Neo-Confucians who were active in writing manifests against Buddhism being a foreign religion and believing its monastic and egalitarian philosophies destroyed the social system of duty and rights of both the upper and lower classes. The fourth Buddhist persecution. In the year 955, Emperor Shizong of the Later Zhou dynasty ordered that any statues of Buddha be destroyed as the need for copper to create coins was greater. This edict was issued under threat of death if anyone possessed more than 5 jin, around 2.5 kilograms of copper, with lesser weights gaining less harsh penalties. It remains unclear how many Buddhist monks, nuns and laypersons were executed under this edict, although historical evidence of the time shows little in the way of any massacres taking place and large numbers of monks and nuns being forced to return to civilian life. However, according to the Soka Gakkai Dictionary of Buddhism, Emperor Shizong was indirectly responsible for 3,336 of China's 6,030 Buddhist temples at that time being destroyed. How Buddhism was regulated at that time. In the early 10th century, a report was written on heretical Buddhist believers that stated that sometimes Buddhist clergy and laity are ignorant and thoughtless, that men and women live together illicitly, form themselves into groups, gathering together at night and dispersing at dawn, being clandestinely loose in their morals. A further report from 1035 offered a substantial reward, totaling 30 strings of cash, the estimated annual salary of a postal worker at that time. Away from this conjecture, constant wars drained China of money. Taxes were required to be raised to pay for this war effort, and not just Buddhism, but all religion was not paying their share of those taxes. Buddhist ordination certificates were sold to boost that revenue. Those certificates were used to prove a monk's tax, work and military exemption. In the year 1067, these certificates became official policy, which resulted in rich members of the lay community appropriating Buddhist temples to build tax-exempt wealth. In 1109, an imperial decree stopped the loophole enabling wealthy laymen from funding temples, and 4 years later the temples lost their status as being exempt from taxes. Until then, with an uneven balance of people claiming tax exemption, the state lost a major source of income as well as potential military personnel. Through Wang Anshe, known as a Prime Minister of Reform, the state began to take on social welfare functions that were previously seen as being provided by Buddhist monasteries, including instituting public orphanages, hospitals, dispensaries, hospices and cemeteries. That is all for this video. If you have enjoyed watching and it has shown you a little detail of life here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link. To the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.